Welcome back to the Development Tank, guys. Thanks for jumping on again. Big shout out. We hit 9,000 subscribers recently. Thanks so much. We're heading to 100,000. If you haven't hit subscribe, please hit the subscribe button. We're going to stay here. We're going to keep bringing you guys value, so make sure you stick around and get those bell notifications turned on. Now, today we've got Gav. Gav's going to peel back the curtain and look at those costs that are behind his feasibilities. You guys have asked, now we're about to deliver. We're going to stick around. Gav's going to come on. We've got all the costs that sit behind his feasibilities. If you guys are struggling with this stuff, if you're struggling to understand what goes into these feasibilities and the things you should be thinking about, we're going to hit it up with Gav shortly. Now, Claire's back with the theme of spreadsheets and costs and feasibilities and all that sort of stuff. Claire's going to carry on that theme. We're going to dive into her cost sheets and we're going to look at how do we manage our projects from a feasibility point of view. We've bought the site. Gav's delivered the feasibility. How does Claire and her projects team manage to that outcome? So let's look at budget and forecasting versus actual costs. When you get proposals, do those proposals match up with what was in the original feasibility? Because guys, as we know in developing, if your budget and actual can stay quite consistent throughout the project, your success or your chance of success goes up exponentially. So stick around for that. It's a big one today, guys. Feasos, dialing in the costs, and then also into the cost sheets with Claire. So a full spreadsheets day. Buckle in. Let's get into it. Let's go, guys. Site Insiders. If you know, you know. We've got Gav back in the office. Like I said earlier, this is what everyone's been asking for. Fish, get your popcorn, sit down, son, and dial into this because Gav always brings his feasos week in, week out. Now he's going to rip back the curtain and he's going to show us all the little costs that make up his feasibility. So super exciting. Gav, thanks for coming.
Good to be back. Yes, the soft costs in the cell in the spreadsheet that we've been presenting is just a number essentially, and we do touch on it, we tell people about it, but there's a lot happening behind the scenes. It's just another sheet on the spreadsheet that we populate and we keep that up to date, and just depending on the configuration of the development, which I select from a drop-down menu on the front page, that will automatically then change the project's soft cost page to suit the circumstances or the format or the design, which then automatically feeds in the spreadsheet. So for me, it's just a matter of keeping up to date, which you can probably touch on as we get into it, just keeping up to date with the actual cost per unit. But generally, for a spreadsheet that I'm working on, it just automatically populates. So, but it's probably why we just breeze over it week to week. It's not so much we don't want to tell people, it's just in the background, but it's good to have an opportunity now to talk through it.
Yeah, and it's probably one, I take for granted, the hard work that you guys do in the background, but these feasos come to life for us pretty quickly. But I think, the credit is the diligence that happens on the back end to make sure the costs are tight. So it's amazing how the projects team work so sort of concurrently to make sure that, if the projects teams are seeing a fee pop up or a fee be increased or decreased, not that decreased happens very often, but movement in there, that they pass it on to you and you keep your feasos pretty well dialed.
Yeah, we do I get updates from the projects team fairly regularly, as you'll see when later on in the episode when you work through the project costs with Claire. She emailed out only a couple of weeks ago regarding some of the design costs, and there was one slight increase, but it was also then it was broken out a bit more, so it gave me a bit more variability, if you like, in the back end to choose, so we're a bit more accurate.
Yeah, love that, Gav. So now this is exciting. Now you've picked a site, one of your favourites. So we've got the famous 10 Daily Road, Sandringham, a 3-site, Gav. So you're just going to give us, I guess, a quick touch on and remind people what the site is, and then we're going to get into the back end.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we've been through the feasibility, we've been through the site. So great site, as we know. We're down in Sandringham. It's a corner site there. The main reason why I just wanted to touch on it here is that it's not just a dual lock. This is actually a 3 townhouse site. We're doing 3 dwellings, so that does impact some of the soft costs.
Yeah, perfect. Now, Let's get into, I guess, the back end, and we'll sort of, I guess, start from the top and start from, I guess, those purchase costs, and slowly but surely we will work through line by line what we've got here.
So we've got here planning just a line item cost at about 138 grand, right? So that feeds in from my project cost sheet, which is just here. Now, what I'll try and skip through some of the stuff that a bit quicker that's maybe not so important, but at least I just want to provide a high level so that people can understand sort of how it works. Just this top section, very quickly, I add in the purchase date, settlement terms, how long we think for planning, documentation and construction, and then settlement at the end. And what that does is that feeds the dates down here. There's formulas set up in each of those cells, which then what I can later do is I can extrapolate the information out of this with a pivot table and create a cash flow forecast, which then can be presented to clients if needed. We don't do it that often, but for investors, it provides me with the ability to provide not just a cash flow chart, but I can then summarize it and say, look, the investors will have to pay X amount in this month of this year, and then maybe in 6 months you will need X amount at that stage as well. So it just provides them with a forecast of when they need to consolidate their cash or their inputs, and also organising finance.
Yeah, nice work, Gab. I think that's a great tool. A lot of the investors we work with, a lot of them, these projects go for circa 2 years. So you got that, you got the 8 quarters there, and yeah, to give them an idea of when the lumpy sort of stages of the projects are and what quarter they're in, I know for a fact really helps them with their cash flow, sort of from a high level. So it's great to be able to provide clients and developers with that.
Yeah, it's good, a great tool, and again, it's pretty much all automated. So it's just getting it set up right at the front and making sure you've got the right data inputs, and it's pretty easy to run through from there.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so I've just hidden the top few lines there so we can see a bit more clearly. So as an overview, we've just structured it pretty much as a project would take place through the projects team from design right through to sales, essentially, and we've broken it out into different stages, probably just because there's I guess points within the project where you consolidate and you review, and when you're going out for build contract and when the build cost comes in, and when you get a town planning permit.
Yep.
So it's sort of broken out in that format. Yeah,
100%. These are definitely, I think, even from an early point in our business, these are the, I guess the main stages, that makes sense, I suppose. So, yeah, great.
Okay, so first stage we've got here is design and planning. So this is when we're prepping for our town planning permit. So we've got land surveying. Typically, we'll get a surveyor out on the ground week after we buy.
Yeah, 100%. The team's amazing. As soon as a job drops, every day's a prisoner. So yeah.
So I guess as well, maybe we'll just quickly touch on a lot of the costs that we've got in this sheet here are costs that I guess they're not exclusive to us, but we have a lot of projects on. We do have regular contractors and consultants we use, so we do get pretty competitive pricing. So it's definitely important for you, if you're looking at pursuing something like this, to have obviously your network of suppliers and consultants, but then also establish your own, I guess, cost chart.
Yeah, spot on, Gavin. That's a great point. Because of the volume we do, the pricing that people will see in here is definitely on the pointier end of things. And also even sort of certain councils will charge certain fees. So we are location specific. We might be type of townhouse specific, where if there's strong little fish partnerships in here, that those fees may be more competitive. So I think it's definitely consume and take a lot out of this, but do your own due diligence, do your own pricing, get your own proposals, build those relationships, and fill this in accordingly, and don't just take these numbers as gospel. It's a good exercise. Go out there, do the due diligence yourself, and figure out what things are costing. But as we always say, this will get you heading in the right direction. Yeah,
no, I second what you were saying there about going out to your consultants and contractors, because you build relationships just through that communication and understanding and listening and the back and forth to get an understanding on what you're trying to achieve and also what the cost from those consultants will be, you're building that friendship, or you're building that relationship, you're building that trust.
Yeah, spot on, Gav. Spot on, Gav. All right, let's work through them.
So yeah, with all that in mind, we may seem like might skip over a couple of prices, but so we're not going to explain exactly how we got to that number, but there are a couple of curly ones here which we'll touch on. Yeah. So your land surveyor, you've got your arborist, so that's just basically to do a bit of a survey of the site. It's becoming quite common that it's a necessity. Sometimes I
would say the arborist didn't always live in our feasibility. It was something you had to. It was site specific, but fair to say the arborist is in the template.
Yeah, look, it's not something that you always incur, but it's better to have it there than not.
Yep.
Now the drafting fees. This is for town planning. So this is one we will discuss a little bit further. We've got 3 dwellings here, so there are additional costs. We've got a standard fee for a side by side. Then for each additional dwelling after that, obviously you're paying extra. If you've got a corner site or a front to back where you've got individual dwellings, it can be a slightly different cost there again as well. So they're the sorts of questions you want to ask your designer. They'll probably give you a schedule of fees for those sort of 2 or 3 different formats, and I've got them at the bottom of this sheet, and based on the format that I enter at the start of the process, it'll automatically choose the right data and make that calculation.
Yep.
So we've got a town planner as well, which we typically do engage a town planner. Most projects.
100%. There's a couple of municipalities out there that our certain designers may take that role on, depending on the project. If the projects if they're pretty straightforward in an area where, say a dual lock is quite straightforward, that can happen. But yeah, often there's a town planner for sure.
Yeah, great. So the council fees for your town planning process. Now, the MPL fee. Do you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, so the Metropolitan Planning Levy, it's just one of those ones that's crept in over the years. Essentially, it is calculated from your estimated build cost and that sort of thing. So it's definitely something you want to Google and dial in and see how much it's costing sort of in certain areas. And like I said, it is derived from build cost. So it will be dependent on how big the project is, how many dwellings and build cost estimates and those sorts of things. So, but definitely one that needs to be in there, but do your digging.
And that can also vary between councils as well.
100%.
And what you find when you start looking, it may be a little confusing at first. This is part of the learning process, but all the information typically you'll find on their websites.
Yep, spot on.
Great. So moving right along, sustainability design assessment. Sometimes we actually allow a bit extra there because there might be 2 of those required.
Yeah.
Now, you'll see that for every section, I've also included just a small contingency.
Yeah, I like that. I love a line of contingency, Gav.
So we'll see a total of that further down. So then you've got your total costs there. Just in my spreadsheet, just a little nicety. If I get a site come to us that has plans on it already, I can just cancel that out and it'll take it out for me. So that will then feed obviously into the feasibility calculator on the other page. So you don't have to pay for those fees if you've already got town planning drawings. Moving into the documentation stage, assuming you've got your town planning permit. So you've got your working documents, your working drawings. That also includes your engineering.
Yeah, engineering, energy ratings, structural, all those sorts of things live in that. So that's your package that you can sort of build out, your build permit, tick all those items and head to tender with.
And again, that cell there is also influenced by the same criteria that the town planning design cell. So depending on quantity, type, all that sort of thing. So that does vary quite a bit. Moving along, interior design. Now we've been pretty open that we use Build Her for all our projects.
Yep.
Fantastic consultant. We do a lot of work with them, so we've got a pretty good price for them.
Yep. And then that'd be specific to a 3 site there, Gav. So
absolutely,
that's another one of those ones that you've got the formula dialed in specific to the number of townhouses.
That's right. That cell is also influenced by the same criteria. So you've got a council fee there to endorse your construction drawings and engineering. Again, another little contingency there to help us through, keep the boat afloat.
Love it.
So providing you've got all that information now, we're going to clear the site. Exciting day. So we're into the pre-construction phase. So demolition, that sort of fluctuated a bit. It went up a little bit, but now we're sort of around 20K. All these prices as well should be noted, they're including GST.
Yeah, correct. I was thinking that, but yes, they are including GST. Just there's definitely, as far as a client facing or a retail client or mum and dad investor or whatever it is, this is the cash that they will need to put in and obviously claim back those GST credits, sort of quarter on quarter. But yes, demolition fees have sort of snuck up like everything else, Gav, but it is probably one that, you definitely have a look at and appreciate what is getting demolished on the site. Is it a little timber shack two better, or is it something a bit larger with lots of vegetation and a pool and all this sort of stuff? So that is something that does need a little bit of nous, guys, and sort of dialing in and seeing what you are actually demolishing.
Just touching actually on the GST, I've got a column here where I've got the actual GST value. That's including GST. That's the GST value that is included in that number. You'll see a bit later on what that data is used for. So you've got your building permit cost there, 6.6 thousand. Another contingency just to help us through. Next on, we're into the construction phase. So basically, you've got your connections here, your main utility connections, your water, your power, your NBN. They're all there. They are also dependent on the quantity of dwellings on the site. So that will vary depending at the very front page where you've got number of dwellings, you've got 3 in there, you've got 2, all of that automatically changes.
Correct. And I think, Gav, another good point, like when you look to buy sites, you do your dial before you dig, and that's a great discipline in here that we do, and depending on where services are or they aren't, potentially that can alter what it may cost to sort of get those services to you in the odd situation that they might fall a bit short from your side, or there might be upgrades involved. But again, guys, dial before you dig. It's a free service, and it just pushes you to make sure that those services are at your site, running past your site, whatever the requirement is.
That happened just the other day. We had a client who bought a site to us.
Yes.
And the water mains didn't actually go up to his site.
Yeah, he was the last one in the subdivision. It looked like that, no, we stopped before his site. So he'll be looking down the barrel at extending those mains. So anyway, but yes, spot on, Gav.
Keep on it. So next step here, we've got the total cost of construction, including the contingency, which we've put into the leading page. Now, I've got a breakout here. This is probably more of a traditional breakout for a construction contract. They do vary now, and there are different conditions. You'll probably find builders asking for a more regular payment schedule, so that may be broken out into 10 payments sometimes.
Yep.
But in this particular example, it breaks out your total cost per stage as per the date here, which we've sort of calculated based on experience more than anything. But it's important because it's such a high cost. I mean, we're talking 2.5 million here. So, and that's going to be spread over probably 10 plus months. So you want to know when those payments are required because they're big numbers.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, based on whether you use, that sort of 6-stage payment scenario like you got there, or whether they're broken up into 12, those months and that cash flow really isn't that different. It still does give you a good sense of, all right, in the first few months, what am I out for? During the middle stages, it gets a bit thirsty. And then, towards the end, those sort of last couple of sort of fix and lockups and things like that, it starts to get sort of pretty juicy. But yeah, it's a good map of things, irrelevant of what sort of build schedule you are using, because in essence the timing of it is still reasonably relative.
Yeah, well, the most important date there is your deposits in December 2024. So the investors or whoever's going to be running this project or owning this project is going to know from the end of 2024 they're going to be up for some pretty sequential payments of around 2.5 mil. So they need to make sure it's ready to go.
Yeah. The meter will start running,
particularly on that stage of the project. So once we've got the build completed, we're moving into the subdivision and titles. So once again, you've got your surveyor out on site, or not on site, actually wrapping everything up for you.
Yep.
Your council fees for that subdivision. Then the open space contribution. Now, we probably should touch on this a little bit because in our network, we had one of the members email in yesterday asking about that for a bit more detail. So not everyone clearly understands it. So basically, in simple terms, it's only applicable when you've got 3 or more dwellings. So if you're doing a side-by-side, it's just a 0. You don't have to worry about it. And the rule is essentially, and it may vary between councils, but from what I've witnessed, it's pretty much the same everywhere you go. It's 5% of the value of the land at the time of the subdivision. Now, you're just forecasting that, really, aren't you? So what it is based on, and I guess the best indicator is your state revenue office does a land assessment.
Yeah, the valuation. Yeah,
that's right. So you can go from that. The way that we typically do it is we do it from what we buy the land for, which is generally maybe a little bit more. So it's just, I guess, if you like, I wouldn't call it a contingency, but it's better to have a little bit more in the forecast than not. So we just base it on 5% of the purchase price. Yeah,
spot on, Gavin. Yeah, and we're happy with that process. Ultimately, when we do these feasibilities, because the valuation will usually live in the contract of sale, but we may not have the contract of sale on hand. So these numbers are punched out, before we have access to that. Sometimes we update it. Sometimes it's pretty close anyway. But like you said, Gav, the sale price is nearly, I'd say in all cases, higher than the actual valuation that you find inside the contract. So potentially just a little bit of built-in contingency in there, Gav, with the way we do it, which we don't have a problem with that.
I do have a cell on the leading calculation page that you can overwrite that particular data. Maybe one example would be a site we tried to pick up on the weekend, and it was advertised at 175, and it was probably valued around that. Ended up selling for $2,050,000. So in that case there, and if you're going to subdivide it, that was a dual lock, but that's an example there where the value of the site is more value in the site for a developer than what the land. What the SRO actually see in the site themselves. So
yeah, correct. I think there was a genuine difference between the valuation inside the contract versus the ultimate sale price. So
doesn't happen very often, but that was just an example. So keep your eye on it. It's just again, it's just being diligent.
It's 100%, and that's what a lot of this is about. It's about having your spreadsheet, having your line items, and just making sure you acknowledge these things. Like we were talking about earlier, Gav, not all these numbers are to the dollar. Some are a bit more, some might be a little bit less. And that's something we'll get into with Claire a little bit later on when Claire is managing budget to actual. There will be some variance, but the key is things go wrong when line items get missed. It's not so much if there's a variance of 5%, 10%. It's more so around if line items get missed, that's when things can really bite you.
All right, so we've touched on that. So just to wrap this section out, we've got our solicitor fees for the subdivision. Another contingency there. Now, the contingency I don't actually put on top of the open space contribution because we've almost got one built in, but it would also be it would really jack that value up there. Probably not really. It's not in context with the rest of the actual costs.
Yep.
So just before we sell the property, we've got some marketing costs here and some value there for 3D renders. It really just depends on your strategy.
Yeah, correct. I think standard, we always run an off the plan play. If a client or an investor is looking to sell, and there's some costs there that our real estate agencies put together, some marketing schedules, got some great relationships with marketing people for renders and floor plans and all that sort of stuff. So we pull all that together, and essentially that's the out of pocket stuff there.
Yep, great. So all of the costs we've just discussed are costs that will be incurred up until when you sell the property. So they're out of pocket, essentially. So that helps to also then calculate the GST credits that you'll receive through that process as well, which we can touch on in a bit. Just to wrap it up, we've got our costs incurred at settlement. So these costs just come out of the agreement, the contract.
Yeah, correct. As you settle out the properties, that money falls out. So not really a part of your cash flow. More so, obviously need to acknowledge the cost and because it affects the return, but not part of the cash flow. But Gav, amazing insights into the back end of the feasibilities. I think everyone's going to get a lot of value out of that. And there's probably more things we could dive into, but I think for today, that's perfect. And I think to get everyone heading in the right direction, great insights, but make sure you do your due diligence. And make sure you keep your finger on the pulse. I think that's probably the main thing. Putting numbers in, but then, month on month, half year on half year, then your numbers need to be dialed in and current.
Yeah, that's right. It's just doing the work, really.
Doing the work.
And keeping the conversation going with your contractors and your consultants.
Yeah, correct. And I think, Gavin, another good point, these spreadsheets live in the Little Fish Network. So these resources are accessible to anyone inside the Little Fish Network. So make sure you jump in and have a knock around in there and sort of see what that's all about. But yeah, jump in there, suss it out, use the resources. A lot of time and effort's gone into these, so you can jump in and sort of take advantage. But Gav, thanks so much for the insights. You'll be back next week with proper feasibilities and proper opportunities. But for this week, we sort of got our nerd on and got the spreadsheets out.
We love spreadsheets.
Good on you, Gav. Please share that with anyone that's going to get value. Site insiders, if you know, you know. Welcome back, guys. Project Snapshot. We've got Claire in the office today. She's back now. As I said earlier, it's a spreadsheet kind of day. Gav was into the feasibilities, the curtain was peeled back, and all the costs were shown. So, for you nerds out there, you Feeso guys, it's a great day for you. But now we're going into, okay, we got a Feeso, we've got the site. How do we manage it into that outcome? It's super important. Your Feeso gets done, the site gets purchased. You can't just aimlessly manage the site and cross your fingers and hope that the margin is there at the end. So Claire's going to unpack how we do it in here and how the team manages to the feasibility. Because if you manage to the feasibility, the spreadsheet suggests you will achieve your margin. So super important part of it. Claire, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a good one, Claire, something that you guys really prioritise when you receive a site and the feasibility from the acquisitions team, from Gav, myself, Nathan. And we're about to get into a spreadsheet that really, I believe, really keeps you flying straight, keeps you conscious about the costs that have been allowed. It's not always right. Potentially there's some unders, there's some overs throughout there, but on the macro, it keeps you flying straight.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the important part is if you do a feasibility and almost forget about it, not necessarily forget about it, but put it in the back drawer, those smaller quotes that you're pulling up, and I know you went through all the little soft costs with Gav before, but those quotes you're getting along the way, if you don't have that budget and that forecasted cost in front of you, you don't really know what you're managing to. And it's almost like you're waiting till the end to go, did I hit that overall soft cost figure or did I not?
So super important that we actually get those lessons from the budget to the actual and give that feedback back to the acquisitions department, because being unders dangerous and being overs is dangerous as well. We don't want to price ourselves out of it, and we don't want to fool ourselves by having low figures in there. So I think it really helps us learn the lessons and dial it in and give the feedback to the acquisitions department. But also throughout the project means you guys can challenge things, challenge whoever's given you a proposal that you think might be overs, or it might be drastic unders, and then that might trigger something as well. So I think just really good disciplines here.
Yeah, absolutely. I sit next to Gav downstairs, so constantly giving feedback to each other. I mean, once we get through a project stage, let's call it the first stage of town planning, Gav and I will recap about how did that feasibility go, have soft costs move, is land surveyor still the same price, those sort of things. Like you said, you don't want to be overpricing them at feasibility stage, but you definitely don't want to be underpricing them. So I think that's really important. And then the other element to managing your costs is, yes, sticking to budget, but also having that constant flow of what you have spent today, because you can't make a decision for a project without knowing what you've spent and what you've got left to spend.
Okay, great. 100%. Great disciplines. Now, let's have a look at the project cost sheet and how you guys lay it out.
Yeah, let me talk you through. I suppose let's start with, I'll get handed a project. And first thing I do, This here is a snapshot of what our cost sheet looks like, and probably what your cost sheet should look like if you're going along at home or doing your own development. So this column being your forecast column or your budget column. So we get the feasibility, and everything what you just went through with Gav gets populated into this column and becomes your overall budget. Another great point on this is your budget and your feasibility. If it's set up correctly, it also prompts you to know who's the next consultant or who's the next contractor that I need to engage. So if we just go down here, we've got land surveying, arborist, drafting, town planner. They're 4 consultants that we can't get into town planning without. So it's almost acting as your program as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a checklist. Obviously, we've got other sort of management tools where probably these items pop up before this fail-safe comes along. But for people playing along at home, this could be their gospel, their Bible, their North Star, and their project runs out of something like this. Like I could see that for sure. So I think it's great that as you're going through it, it's sort of, hey, what about that arborist or that town planner or land surveying, is that done? So it's good to follow along and keep diligent on and make sure you don't miss anything.
Yeah, it prompts you for cost, but also prompts you for that next stage. So I've picked up the same cost sheet to match Gav's Feeso. So people following along at home, we are talking about daily. So after we put in all our forecast costs or our budget costs, we then move over in the spreadsheet and have what we call committed. So these are any costs where you have signed a deal with. So you've got a quote from a consultant, or you've signed your contract of sale. Anything that you have said, yes, I've agreed to that figure, goes into this section. So I'll give you an example. When we take over as the projects team, a project management agreement has been signed and accepted before it gets to us. So at that point, yes, I put it into the budget, but straight away I know what that signed figure is. So that can go into all your stages as we go down through this spreadsheet. And that can live there throughout the life cycle of the project, knowing exactly what you've committed to.
Yeah, correct. So like you said, proposal signed, it is committed, that will be the number.
Yeah, exactly. And then from here, this variance column will then show you if you're either up or down on what was allowed in the feasibility. Something like our PM fee, of course, it's going to be correct in the feasibility because it's all in-house. So that's not a great example when it comes to variance. So that's an obvious example where you're cost neutral and there's no win, no loss.
Perfect. And that's the thing, I think the example you pulled out there, Claire, our fee essentially is nearly the only thing inside the feasibility that is fixed. Everything else is an estimate. So spot on. So that is an example of a sort of cost neutral result, which will always be the case. But as you can see there, there's a couple there that have got the green colour there, which is usually a good thing.
That is a good thing. So with this project, we're at a stage where we're submitting to council. So what you'll see is we have engaged, like I said earlier, the land surveyor, the arborist, the designer, and the town planner at this stage. So they have fallen into our committed costs. And at this point where we've signed the deal, you'll move over to, like I said, the variance column and see, are you up with money or are you down? And that's that feedback you were talking to earlier. That's the feedback we then give to Gav and say, yep, you're right, or no, drafting's gone up.
Yeah, I think, and it's a good one because even when, you're getting proposals in, the team's getting proposals in, they plug the numbers into the committed total there. And if red's coming up on the other end, it then can sort of push you to say, hold on, go back to the proposal maybe and say, is scope right? Can we negotiate any more to try and hit budget? And if you can, you can, great. If you can't, you can't. But the idea is that the projects team actually delivers on the budget that's been provided. Yeah,
exactly. And it does. It gives you that target. We always joke in the projects team, say you'll have your target or your budget and take 10% off that and just start seeing that number, and you should always target that number and hope that you land somewhere in between. I think consultants, and this is probably just from my learnings, I think consultants are harder to negotiate with than contractors. So contractors, you have a bit of pull with builders and demolition contractors, but I do find consultants harder. In saying that, our fees that we get are pretty tight in comparison to the industry.
Yeah, correct. And I think sort of a lot of those sort of, I guess, agreements, depending on the projects, can be pretty set in stone, and which is nice because when you do your feasibilities, you can do them with confidence. But it is a good fail-safe to make sure that maybe the consultant isn't sort of reaching over a little bit, and maybe costs are starting to be inflated. So definitely a good fail-safe, I suppose. But by the look of it, there's some green in that design and planning stage, which like you said, Claire, the team genuinely gets pride out of stacking some green numbers, because let's be honest, you're probably getting close to a red at some point when something happens not as you probably want it to. But if you can stack a bit of buffer there, and as Gav went through, he does allow some contingency inside his sort of back end of his FISO, I suppose. So if you can sort of try and get a little bit ahead, when a red invariably pops up, you can cover yourself.
I knew that was coming. So we do have a red down here. What you'll notice is it is for the designer. So it's for our working documentation. What you'll also see up where we've got our big green, it is for the same consultant, so the designer, but the town planning phase. So I suppose overall we've probably balanced ourselves up. What are we, $100 up, 145 up? It needs to almost be read in parallel. It's probably more work has gone into the town planning stage. We do have pools. There'll be more energy requirements and more reports that are required. So overall, yes, in the feasibility we had the right amount, but it's been allocated differently.
Yeah, and I think that happens, and it's great we understand that, and it's great that Gav and the acquisitions guys at the back end or concurrently can look at it and sort of say, oh, maybe we are a bit heavy on the front end, and should sort of flip them out a bit. But that's essentially where you get the learnings. If without this, there's no learnings.
Yeah, and there's nothing really to work towards, right, for future jobs.
Yeah, correct.
The other thing is, again, like you said before, these are small wins, like $500 here and there. But if you can keep adding those little wins up, it does help, because something will pop up. Something pops up in every job that you can't foresee. So it will really help.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's all trending in the right direction. The numbers aren't too far away. Like ultimately this is a, between $5 and $6 million project. So the greens and the reds are all friendly, but there's no doubt. And that's the thing, like project management is an art form. It's not just, fly by the seat of your pants, see how we go, because especially over, I think this is a $5.7 million project. That 5.7 over 2 years, 2.5 years, that can end up 6.5, no drama. So, and that's proper money. That's probably the client's margin, really. So, it's just good practice and good discipline. Whether it's $90, $99, $5.50, it's good practice to be sort of managing it as you are. Yeah.
Yeah, in front where you can be, right? And then the last sort of section that we'll come to is the actual column or actual section. So this is anything that has been invoiced and paid. So at any one time, you can see that you've committed to a certain amount or paid a certain amount. So if we go down to the bottom, like you said, that 5.7 total project cost, that's the number we're targeting overall for the development. But then you'll see at this point, we have only signed up $2.8 million worth, and that includes your purchase price and then some soft costs along the way, as well as our PM agreement.
Yeah, and then you can go across to see what the client has actually paid to this point. So probably pretty quickly, this actually tells everyone a lot. Instantly it says the client's paid $333,000 of the circa 5.7. So still a long way to go on this one, and a few few invoices to be paid.
Your big one, sorry to cut you off, your big one is your settlement, which is coming up shortly, and then you'll probably sit around that similar 2.8.
Yeah, correct. No, great tools and amazing lessons out there for anyone. Bunker in, do the feasibilities. I know a lot of you guys, Fish, you're there sitting back going, great, love the feasibility. You learn a bit more today, but translating it from buying the site into this is going to make you such a better operator, is going to dial you in with the costs that come through, and whether you're right or wrong, up or down, and both spreadsheets get to talk to each other and you get to learn the lessons, and you get to be a better property developer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're lucky. We've obviously got you guys doing the feasibilities, but I think that's where the importance lies. If you've got to get that right to begin with, because these little up and down wins, they're okay, but to miss something that we're talking $100,000, it can change your whole outcome.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's, and it might be chicken and the egg type thing. If you're out there developing and you're doing it yourself, doing the feasibility, okay, great, you bought the site, you've got some numbers there. To do this exercise and run a project, unless you're tracking it like this and actually appreciating the money you're spending, the proposals you're accepting, all this sort of stuff, and then to go back and to do the variance, then suddenly that makes your feasibility calculator so much more bulletproof, because you've gone through a project, you've learnt the lessons, you appreciate what things cost, the overs, the unders, and then next time you do a feaso, you're going to be tighter again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Claire. A great insight into how we manage budget versus actual. How we learn the lessons, how we stay current, and how we stay dialed in here. So well done, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, guys. Please, anyone that's going to get value out of that, remember these spreadsheets are in the network. So if you're interested in this, if you see value in this, jump into the network, use these resources, ask questions, dial in, learn faster, be better faster. Happy developing.